going to share my screen and see if we can't get started here and make a go of this. Okay, can everybody see my screen?
We can.
Yay. Okay, so let's get started here. The Cotton Research and Promotion Program, as you all are very much aware of, is the administrative arm for our research and promotion program. The Cotton Board serves as the assessment site. We collect the assessments and make sure that everyone is appropriately participating in the program. We administer the program and make sure that the research and promotion program is as awesome and as boisterous as it can be. We communicate with those stakeholders out there, such as you, on what it's doing. And it just is one of those programs that, as a former member of the sorghum checkoff program, it's the epitome of what checkoff programs should be in the U.S. It was one of those that other commodity programs want to be like, and it's an honor to be part of a program that has got such high standards in it. Communication with those stakeholders, such as yourselves, involves a lot of getting out, getting our boots in the dirt, meetings, and your time as well. But we want to make sure that the program is as robust as it possibly can be. The Cotton Incorporated arm of that in the research and promotion program is the arm and entity that research and promotion is conducted through. The research and promotion program through the Cotton Board actually contracts with Cotton Incorporated to conduct the research across the U.S. and to promote cotton to consumers, to make sure that cotton is the fabric of the consumer's choice, and that demand and profitability for brands and retailers, as well as you as producers, continues on and is as robust again as it can be. In these type of situations, USDA is the oversight board of that and governs everything that we do and that Cotton Incorporated does. So, you know, it's not a lobbying firm. We don't designate policy or anything like that. We are strictly research and promotion, and that's what the board was set up to do. So it's a great entity. We all have to, as producers, we all participate in it, and you all have a voice in that program. The Cotton Board assessments, we talk about these oftentimes when we're out in the fields, that as producers in other checkoff programs, they actually have a partner within the Cotton Research and Promotion Program, in that the importers are their partner. The producers put in a little over 53% on average, and the importers put in 47%. But those importers pay back on items that are shipped back to the U.S. that are products containing cotton. So anything that has, if it's apparel, if it's textiles, if it's soft cotton goods, anything such as that, those get a assessment on them based on the amount of cotton that is in those products. So as a checkoff program, we are very unique in that we have producer assessment as well as an importer assessment. No other checkoff program, to my knowledge, has that partnership with producers. And from a compliance perspective and a research and promotion perspective, we're very proud of the 99% compliance rate that we have within the research and promotion program. Trying to collect all those dollars in the various different pockets that they could be in is quite cumbersome. And so when you have that 99% plus compliance rate, we feel very comfortable and very certain that we are picking up all of those dollars that are available, and to help the research and promotion continue to be viable to both the producers and the importers. In 2021, our budget is $80 million. We're down from 2020, $8 million. And part of that comes from the ability that the board has set aside a reserve to keep that research as high as it possibly can during times when there is questions on how much cotton we're going to have or low production. So it's very consistent. The board leadership has taken in great time to make sure that we prepare for the good times as well as the bad times, and make sure, again, that the research and promotion program is doing all that it can to help farmer produce a profitability and production of cotton be as viable as it possibly can during short times and good times. So let's talk a little bit about the state support program. Of all of the assessments that are brought into the research and promotion program, 7.5% of those are going back to the states to make sure that state-specific research projects are addressed with those dollars. It's based off of the production. There is a long calculation that it goes off. It's a Olympic average. And so those dollars are sent back to the state to do research projects. And the state support program is the one that we want to talk about today, where the funding is determined by committee members in each state based off of their assessment and what their needs are. Some of you that are on this call serve as committee members and help make those decisions as far as what research projects are being addressed, and some of you on the call are the PIs as well. So we want to make sure that those projects are addressed in the state. And as you all on this call know, there's been a lot of diligent meetings and understanding as to what your state needs are, but we want to make sure that we're covering everything and that we're communicating that back to other members and participants in the program. Cotton Incorporated Ag Research Committee that is Gaylon is on, and Cater, as you all know, serve as project managers and oversight for that, and make sure that the projects continue to be managed and are coming out with the results that are needed to help you guys be profitable and productive. Any questions so far? Woohoo! Okay, your state support committee members, and I've got it broke down here for Oklahoma and Kansas. Mark Nichols serves as the chairman of Kansas, and you can see that it's spread out across the state in Oklahoma. And in Kansas, it's Kent Dunn is the chairman along with Gary Feist. And again, it is spread out across Kansas. You may know some of these people. If you don't, or if you are one of them, thank you for your time and the efforts that you have put forth on being a state support committee members. It does take some time. There's a meeting that usually happens in June or July, and we go through all of the projects, they go through all of the projects and make decisions on which are best for their state. So again, thank you guys for your support and your time and on those state support committees, and we just appreciate the opportunity to work with you guys and carry on the research and promotion program across the state. As you all know, here is my email address and contact information. If you have any questions along those lines, please feel free to reach out and call me. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and we're going to let Gaylon Morgan take off on his part of the presentation, and hope you guys enjoy that as well. Gaylon?
Okay. Let's see here.
Hey, Gaylon. Hey, Gaylon, it's Mark Nichols, real quick.
Hey, Mark.
Before you get started, while everybody's still on here, I want to be sure and recognize Seth. Dr. Seth Byrd was named the State Cotton Specialist of the Year at the Beltwire Conference a few days ago. So I want to be sure and recognize Seth and his good work for the cotton industry.
Thank you, Mark. I'm glad you brought that up. Seth was obviously very deserving of it, and some of the comments that were made by his fellow cotton specialists were very impressive. He has a very, not only is he having a very strong impact in Oklahoma, but he also has a strong impact across the cotton belt. But thanks for bringing that up. Very important point.
We've been really lucky in Oklahoma. We've had some really good ones over the years, and Seth's just another one in the line of very good ones that we've had in Oklahoma.
Agreed. And, you know, also as we go through this presentation and at the end, hopefully, you know, if Randy has comments or Seth, either one, obviously, you know, their input's very welcomed as well, because there's always room for improvement on any sort of program. So Shelley has asked me to cover the Oklahoma and Kansas, the State Support Committee overview. We've done this we broke Texas up into 2 pieces because of the broad geography, and we did those on Tuesday and Wednesday of this week and have received good feedback on both of those presentations. So hopefully today we'll be the same and get input from you all about the program, you know, likes or dislikes, but also if you have research priorities that you think should be undertaken. There are several extension folks on the line today, including Seth and several others from Oklahoma, but also some from Kansas as well. Stu and Sarah are both on the line. So if you guys have research ideas, we would like to hear those as well. But it's a pleasure to be here today. Similar to Shelley, I missed the summer meeting with you guys. I had to do that virtually. But you know, hopefully this July we'll be able to get together and go through the proposals in person and be able to have the interaction that we all kind of long for at this point. So the 2021 State Support Committee funding for Oklahoma was $107,000. I know breaking that $100,000 was quite a milestone for Oklahoma. Very happy for you guys and some of the projects you're supporting with that funding. And then Kansas also continues to increase their level of State Support Committee funding, and they were at $30,000 in 2021. The funds that here through the State Support Committee, that does not include the core funds. And several of you on the line are familiar with that, but that's usually those core funds kind of stay, I guess you could say, within Cotton Incorporated, and those are usually directed toward sort of multi-state, many times long-term type projects, while the State Support Committee funds are usually directed toward more local and immediate issues that you guys as the growers may be dealing with. So kind of the selection and accountability process for the projects, you know, Oklahoma and Kansas State Support Committee basically set their priority areas and send out a RFP. This process is, you know, a bit more informal than some of the other states that have been, you know, had larger quantities of money, but it's worked very effectively for you guys. And, you know, I would say, you know, stick with it because it's worked well. But essentially, you know, make the call out for research proposals, and Seth plays a big part in that in Oklahoma. The proposals are kind of have an initial review, if you will, by the Cotton Incorporated staff for scientific merit, but ultimately the state support committees have complete discretion on what projects are funded. This is basically you guys' money and you spend it as you wish. The projects are funded annually, but the State Support Committee realizes that some of these projects need to go on for multiple years. So in that situation, it would be a renewal for these projects that need to continue for multiple years, but funding itself is on an annual basis. And then, as Shelley mentioned, basically after you guys approve projects, then it comes into Cotton Incorporated, and those projects are allocated to a project manager such as myself, and I'll show some of the others here in a little bit, kind of based on discipline. And then the scientists that receive that funding from the State Support Committee, they have to submit quarterly and annual reports for each project, and they're reviewed by the Cotton Incorporated staff. And these reports are also available to the State Support Committee members if you guys or ladies would like to see them after their submission. So there's nearly complete transparency in this whole process as what's happening with your funding. And then also for Oklahoma, there's in-person presentations on project accomplishments, usually in that July meeting. I think Kansas will probably be the same way as your funding increases. And as these projects are funded, I think that would be a good option for Kansas as well to see, again, how your funds are being spent and what's been accomplished with those funds. So again, after you guys, the State Support Committee, select the funding or the projects, then they're allocated to the different staff at Cotton Incorporated, you know, by discipline more or less. So, you know, if it's an entomology project, then it would go to Ryan Kurtz. If it's a weeds or nutrient management or soil health, it's going to be assigned to me. If it's a breeding effort, it would be assigned to Don Jones, et cetera. Or ag engineering, irrigation type projects would go to Ed Barnes. And then if you have more specific questions about the State Support Committee program, that information is available on the Cotton Incorporated webpage. You can see the link there, and I can provide this if any of you desire, but it basically lays out which projects are funded for each of the individual states. And then if you're looking for specific information related to management of cotton and videos associated with cotton management, that can be found at Cotton Incorporated, Cotton Cultivated webpage. And if you have any specific questions, there's my email. I'll be happy to answer those as well about the State Support Committee funding projects. The one thing I really wanted to point out here is, I mean, this is why the checkoff dollars were approved to begin with, is basically leveraging your funds, knowing that research and promotion, investing your grower dollars in research and promotion provides a positive return on investment. So these are just a few things I'd like to point out as to how your funds are leveraged to bring value to the growers. Basically on the State Support Committee, well, on the State Support Committee projects and funding, there is no overhead paid to the university, or if USDA was funded, there would be no overhead. Now this does not make necessarily the university administrators happy, but it basically allows your grower dollars to go further, because any of the other major grants that come in, whether they're from industry or USDA or whatever else, there's in many cases or most cases 25 to up to 50% overhead taken out of those grants. So that money doesn't actually go to the scientist, it goes to the administration. With your dollars, with your State Support Committee money, every dollar goes to the scientists that you have chosen to fund. It also keeps preeminent scientists with universities and USDA engaged in conducting cutting edge research in cotton. You know, the funding that we have through state support or through CORE isn't as substantial as we would like it to be, but it is enough to keep some of these preeminent scientists engaged in cotton, you know, across the entire cotton belt. So that's very important as well. Also, your State Support Committee funds provide seed funding for researchers to pursue some of these larger federal grants that could be, you know, hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars. It also keeps many of the company-sponsored trials balanced. So some of the projects are kind of broad in scope to address emerging issues. And so with some of the funding from the state support, that may be directed to a company-sponsored project, and a few more treatments may be added that will allow that company project to be more balanced and provide you guys with useful information from that particular industry-sponsored trial. And then another important point that's very difficult to put a dollar figure on, but training the next generations of farmers, leaders, consultants, county agents, and researchers with knowledge of cotton, and maybe even more importantly, the desire to serve the cotton industry. But, you know, just thinking back from my prior position at Texas A&M as a cotton specialist, you know, I would say a fair number, and this is probably on the very low end, but probably for every dollar that you invest, you're getting at least $10 on that investment. Because I know the leveraging that goes on from the points that's listed here, but also other ways that leveraging occurs. So kind of moving into Kansas specifically, and then Seth Byrd is going to cover the Oklahoma portion of it. But you know, this is a graph of the Kansas cotton production, the harvested and planted acres and overall production, which has continued to increase definitely since 2015 pretty dramatically. And, you know, as that has happened, that also increases the amount of state support committee funds that you have available. And as Shelley mentioned, it's an Olympic average, 5-year Olympic average. So it takes out the high and the low and then has the average 3. And that's really good too, because it prevents those peaks and valleys from being, you know, very extreme in the funding. So that helps scientists develop, you know, high quality research projects and educational programming. And I just want to point out, and all the folks from Kansas know this, but, you know, a lot of people, and Stu can attest to this as well, a lot of people, you know, kind of didn't really take Kansas serious as far as cotton production until really recently. But now Kansas is ranked above 4 other states in the Cotton Belt. It's the only state that increased in acres in 2020. And it's comparable now to Louisiana and Arizona in cotton production. So, you know, you guys are moving up the ladder and you're moving up pretty fast. So just keep that in mind. That's a great thing as the cotton acreage expands into Kansas. So congratulations on that. So looking at some of the past funding, and I went back to 2015 as far as projects supported through the Kansas State Support Committee projects, and I didn't come on board till 2019, so I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail on some of these earlier ones. But in 2015, there was some weed control project was funded. There was also in 2015 and 2016, basically the value of water being irrigation in Kansas cotton production. 2017, there was a kind of a promotional activities, if you will. And then 2018, I didn't find any project funded in 2018. And then 2019 and 2020, this is a project that was led by Rex Friesen, looking at the boll weevil monitoring, developing a boll weevil monitoring program, which I think has been very helpful in kind of building into y'all's boll weevil eradication program that you're moving into or have moved into now. So very important there. And then looking into 2021, 2 projects were funded for Sarah Lancaster, and Sarah's on the line as well. But looking at harvest aid evaluations in Kansas, and I know that Sarah has been working with Seth on this as well to kind of come up to speed on some of the harvest aids, and appreciate some of the work she's already put in trying to you know, develop her knowledge base on harvest aids working with Seth, and appreciate Seth taking the time to do that as well. And then Sarah is a extension weed scientist, and she also has a project focused on weed management in Kansas cotton. And again, the specifics of these projects I can provide to you if you have specific questions about them, and we'll be glad to do so. So that's really it for what I have. But before I, you know, end my part of the presentation, I just want to mention that we had a very successful Great Plains Cotton Conference last year. Very great attendance from Kansas and Oklahoma. A lot of really great presenters, and we plan to continue that, or we are going to continue that in 2021. So please put on your calendars February 23rd and 24th. I think many of you may have it on your calendar already. We're still trying to decide on the format depending on the, you know, the COVID cases and things like that and what's happening. I need to send out an email today to get the planning committee together to discuss some of the logistics and things like that, and also, you know, the different topics. But if you have ideas on which topics that you would like to see in that Great Plains Cotton Conference, you know, talk to Shelley, talk to Gary, talk to me, and we can try to get those topics and some of the premier presenters to cover those topics. So with that, I will unshare and turn it over to Seth. And I can take questions now, Shelley, or I can take them later, however you want to deal with it.
Let's take them later, since that's what we talked about. We do have a couple in the chat, but I think once Seth gets through, then it would be beneficial for everybody to go through all of the questions, because they may relate to both states.
Sounds good.
Seth, are you ready to go? Looks like it to me.
Yes, can you, is my screen sharing and all that
Yes.
good?
Yes.
Looks good.
Okay. So, yeah, I'm sort of what Gaylon did. I got a little intro to sort of just Oklahoma cotton landscape, but to give an overview of our state support committee, it's kind of you got 4 entities involved, and obviously Cotton Incorporated, the state support committee itself in Oklahoma. Our Oklahoma Cotton Council, a lot of the members of that are heavily involved in the state support committee as well. And then, of course, the OSU arms, whether it be research and extension. And I'll say everybody that currently does a state support project for Oklahoma is a primary extension faculty. So looking at the Oklahoma landscape, we've got established producers in historical production in sort of the southwest and west central part of the state through here. We've seen some growth, and that's due to a few different things. We've got some, obviously we've always got some producer turnover with new producers in these established regions, but we also got new areas of production or areas that are sort of coming back into production in the panhandle of our state, along sort of this northern tier in the western to central part of the state. And there are spots of cotton throughout the east and even in this central area of the state as well. And so each group of producers or each production area has different needs and different resources available, and that kind of governs and steers the research that we're doing in each area. So this is the Oklahoma acreage trend, and similar to what Gaylon showed for Kansas, you know, since 2015, it's been on the increase. Obviously, you know, like a lot of other states, we declined in 2020 and to a certain extent in 2019. But I think most folks in Oklahoma will probably say that we think we're going to probably stick around sort of this 500 to 550, maybe 600,000 range, somewhere right in here, at least for the short-term future. And we may dip below 500 this coming year. I'm not sure yet, but I think we're going to be sort of right in that sort of ballpark for some time to come. So we've got a wide array of scenarios that we're trying to basically do research to address these different situations. Obviously, we're primarily a dryland state, but you know, like anywhere that you have irrigation, that's going to be the acres that are going to have your biggest inputs and hopefully your biggest production. But both of those require research. We have a variety of season lengths within the state. You know, we're not as big as you know, Texas in terms of geography, but the Panhandle of Oklahoma is a much different environment than the southwest corner, and even as you move east into central Oklahoma, it gets a lot different. And so we have different season lengths, various pest complexes, pest pressures, different rotation practices, and then producer experience. So we've got some very experienced producers that really use research that we do to maybe just tweak some inputs, look at variety selection, maybe some harvest day products, or maybe some herbicide or other crop protection products that are new to the market, versus our newer producers that may just want some basic information, you know, some basic inputs, maybe more general systems research, crop rotations, tillage, crop response to management environment, just things that, you know, they need to sort of get running if they're new to cotton. And we also have different resources available depending on where we are. We have areas of the state that have some tremendously good crop consultants. Some of the best consultants I've ever worked with are the folks here in Oklahoma. And then Rex obviously as well comes down and helps out with a lot of acres that are in the central part of the state that go north when it's time to gin. So we have some great consultants in certain areas. Some areas have more of an industry presence where you're going to have, you know, some of the larger companies coming in and working with large growers, maybe doing some of their own variety evaluations. Some areas have some established retails or co-ops or gyms. And then some areas have hardly any presence at all, outside of maybe some newer consultants or, some growers that have been established, a little bit early. So we have different levels of resources available across our state as well. So, and I think both Shelley and Gaylon mentioned how we identify needs. It really is communication. I mean, if I didn't try to communicate with growers and ask, what they are interested in seeing, what they want to see, I don't really know how you would steer a research program, especially when it's based off producer funds. I mean, to me, I think if you're using producer money, it needs to be answering producer questions. And so the only way to figure out what that is they're not going to call you up and tell you what they want you to do. It involves us getting out there and meeting and talking to them and identifying the needs in these different areas and understanding how each area of our state may have a different need, and then identifying who needs to do what. So, there's a more formal, the state support committee and the commodity group that we can contact. And I think before I even got the job or before I started, I think I called Harvey and asked him, who should I be talking to do on-farm variety trials? So that's sort of the more formal way to go about it. And then we've got field days and these meetings where you can have these side conversations. And so that's how we sort of tend to gear our identification of needs. And it really is, to me, the idea is we want to ensure direct or at least some sort of producer influence onto what we're doing, especially again with commodity funds. So historically in Oklahoma, we may have had, around 2 faculty submitting proposals and folks that were involved in cotton research. That was, the acres were lower, the funding was lower. So you couldn't, fund a mass amount of projects. So now do some adjustments. The composition, my position is now on main campus. And we also have increased acres. We've got a larger group. So we now have 7 folks across 3 different departments that are doing state support work for 2020. And here's a list of those project leaders. So we've got 4 of us that are in plant and soil science, a couple of folks from bio and ag engineering, and then Jerry Goodson, who is housed in the entomology, or I guess entomology and plant pathology department. So I'm just going to do a quick overview of our current projects, and some of these are done and they're going to move on to something else, and some of them are ongoing. So Brian Arnall is our soil fertility extension specialist, and he was looking at evaluating the pH response of cotton. And I think for a lot of us that have done cotton for a long time, we're pretty comfortable with pH ranges and optimal pHs, but there's a lot of those newer producers in the areas that may have been traditionally wheat production, and they may not manage inputs on those production systems like we may typically in cotton. And so looking at what they may run into if they haven't been traditionally managing pH was important for those new producers, especially in the sort of northern areas that don't really have a cotton background. Dr. Jason Warren is our soil and water conservation specialist. He's looking at irrigation scheduling and management. And Jason's primary side, or his location for his state support side, is in the Panhandle. So we've addressed, the sort of the northern newer acres. Jason's working in the Panhandle with that really ultra short season environment. We've got a lot of cotton that's moved into that area. Some of it's taken some ground that would normally be corn, and some folks are splitting pivots, putting cotton on half and corn on the other half. And so a lot of what Jason's doing is working on irrigation scheduling with center pivots, and he's also working with subsurface drip irrigation, as that's becoming more and more of a trend of ways to conserve water, especially in that region. And really the goal of this is to develop some irrigation scheduling tools. The ones that are currently available to us, we've quickly realized are not going to be a good fit for a short season environment. So Jason's looking at developing tools that we can have for producers to use to schedule irrigation in that environment. So Todd Bauman is our weed scientist, and so he's covers basically any kind of weed management, herbicide, new traits trials in Oklahoma. He's been working a lot with volunteers recently With the new traits, controlling volunteers has become a little bit harder to do. So he's done a lot of work recently on that. And I ask all of our folks, you know, how would you gauge how much impact or how much influence producers have on what you do? And, you know, Todd said everything I do comes from producer, you know, questions or ideas or conversations he has. And Todd also has a lot of coordination with the ag industry, obviously the folks that put out the products or develop the traits, sort of identify future needs, hopefully before we get there. So Jerry Goodson is a extension specialist, entomologist by training. He does a lot of insect monitoring and management. He's got pheromone traps and does a lot of surveys. I say Jerry does a lot of networking, so talking with folks, looking at, you know, what's trending in terms of pest populations and movements, and not just in Oklahoma, but also other states as well, to sort of have an idea of what's coming down the line. He also does some work with looking at chemistries or other, you know, insecticide products to evaluate the control of pests, and potentially some new products coming out to look at their fit for Oklahoma. And then Jerry also maintains a newsletter that goes out that basically any specialist that's involved in cotton research can sort of submit an article to Jerry, and he's got a newsletter that he sends out. I believe it's bi-monthly or monthly during the season. I know it's got quite a big circulation, and so Jerry does a lot with the communication aspect as well. And then Dr. Tahaavian is one of our ag engineers, and he's really looking at irrigated cotton from the standpoint of sensors and how sensors can be used for our production areas and by our producers. And so we've got kind of a unique, I talked about the unique environments. We also got a unique setup in the southwest part of the state where we've got an irrigation district where water is, you know, more heavily controlled than maybe you see outside of the district. And so he's doing a lot of work both inside and outside the district, looking at sensors and their feedback and how they can be used. So he does a lot of testing of different types of sensors, a lot of soil moisture type stuff. I know he's doing some things with canopy temperature sensors as well. And so really his whole, you know, goal is identifying ways that we can use these sensors to improve our efficiency of production in a commercial setting. And then Dr. John Long is another ag engineer. John works a lot with equipment and precision ag type work. So his state support project is looking at precision planting to improve emergence. You know, obviously there's a lot of things that go on with cotton that affects the emergence. You know, we have environmental factors, you know, moisture, temperature, and physical barriers, and then mechanical factors. So, you know, the downforce, the depth, speed, seeding rates. There's a lot of, and you guys know better than I do, have these, you know, newer planters. There's all kinds of things you can tweak on those. And so what John's working on is, you know, when you're in these different environmental settings within the same field, what you can do with your planter to hopefully account for that environmental variability and still optimize your emergence. And so here's some examples of John, and he just takes neat pictures. And so I've shown a picture of some of John's work that he did. And this is an on-farm trial. So this is with producer equipment, looking at different emergence. I believe this picture was taken 7 days after planting, looking at the emergence of across two different downforces. And he was looking at, in this particular trial, was different soil EC zones. And so moving forward, he wants to, you know, keep doing this work, looking at different seed sizes. We all know that cotton seed sizes is a moving target. We never know what we're going to get. And so looking at other factors that you can, you know, sort of insert into this that we're going to play a role with emergence. And so I've got a couple of projects. Probably the one that's going to be the most stable that we do every year is a variety evaluation. This is going to be our own farm trials as well as some small plot official variety test. And so for this, I'm just going to really talk about our own farm trials. So this is really, we take a lineup of seed to some producers. There's a little bit more background that goes into it, but and we give them this lineup. We plan a replicated trial, and we're there the day we plant. We look at it throughout the year, but really our input is, here's the seed we're going to plant, and let the producers take it from there. And we try to get as many seed companies represented as we can. Obviously, with the trait packages now, it makes it a little tough. But at least in 1 to 2 trials, we've got 90+% of the seed companies represented in regards to the acreage they have in our state, or the market share they have in our state. And we do this again across all these different scenarios, irrigated, dry land, different regions of the state, to try to give folks that may not have as much information available to them in their area, give them something they can use as a resource. So we had a trial this year. It was actually about 40 minutes south of Stillwater. It may be the furthest east a cotton trial has been in Oklahoma in a long time. But they're kind of in a desert. They don't have folks. There's enough acres there that they need some help, but there's not enough acres there to justify a seed company coming up there and doing a trial, or anybody else. So we're able to provide some information for that area for those folks. So, that's kind of the summary of what we're doing with the variety trials. We can also look at, fiber quality. We do some seedling vigor work. Some of these locations we go back and do other measurements on. We can look at water response. If we got irrigated or even dry land trials in response to rain. We can look at, how these varieties maybe need to be managed in terms of PGRs. You see here on the right, there's a split between 2 plots of on-farm trial, and you can see a pretty big maturity difference there in those varieties. That's good information to know, and obviously provides opportunities for us to have field days or tours of these, and more informal gatherings to share information, or maybe get ideas for future projects. And this is sort of the results of this. So we create these tables of yield and the different fiber quality characteristics, look at loan value. And so we put these variety reports out every year. And right now we're just waiting on our fiber quality data to come back to spit out the 2020 report. Then the other project, and this is sort of, I guess, my personal passion is harvest aids. I love doing harvest aid work, and it's mainly because it's the thing I get asked about the most. And if I didn't do the work, I couldn't answer. And I'm not saying I answer the questions anyway, but at least when folks call, we can have a discussion about what we're seeing and they're seeing through the years. And so there's the sort of the, I don't know, bread and butter, where you look at different tank mixes and you try to tweak things every year. So you got some products that you're going to use that are maybe more stable, and you've got different ways to use them. And so every year that I do a product evaluation, I try to throw in a new wrench. And in this past year, I looked at conditioning sprays. In years before, I've looked at surfactant options. So that's one harvest aid trial that we do. And then one we've been working on recently has been application timing. And really, there was some work done in Oklahoma. I want to say it was in the early 90s was the latest I could find on application timing. Across the belt, we didn't see much done after 2000. So it's been really 20 years since we've kind of revisited harvest aid timing in cotton in general. And so we've been doing that the past couple of years. And really for us, it's about, can we go earlier if we've got that inclement weather forecasted, that freeze that we're all worried about. And so we were evaluating bowl opening and application timing and fiber quality to really answer some of those questions outside of what mix to use. And to me, we've developed some pretty good information. We've got a year left of this study, so we're going to do it one more year. And I think we'll feel comfortable enough to be done with it. But this is looking at that percent open on the y-axis and note above crack bowl there at the bottom, and looking at, how we time harvested applications. We usually say 60% open and 4 note above crack bowl are fairly aligned. And so I'm surprised, I guess, that we saw the same thing. I thought we might hedge our bets a little earlier, but we do have, some variability there within that white circle. And so we found a lot out, nothing that would necessarily cause us to change our current recommendations. But we did see some I guess, good enough results from applying earlier. We didn't see it really ding us on fiber quality. That's kind of what we were worried about. We did eventually get the bowls open, you know, maybe not as quick as you would waiting till later. But we're also going to keep this trial going with some cooperation with John Long's group and look at leaf grades as well. So this trial is kind of, it's answered some questions and it's caused us to ask ourselves a lot more. And so I think that's the benefit to some of these. So just quickly, just to kind of wrap up, some other benefits to doing the State Support Committee and having this group, especially in a state like Oklahoma where your campus is in Stillwater and, you know, your cotton is 2.5 hours at a minimum west of you, at least the bulk acreage is. It provides an opportunity for faculty to meet with the producers. So I don't spend much time in Stillwater, especially during the cotton season. I like to be in a cotton field. I much prefer that to being in an office or somewhere else. I'm sure all of you are the same way. But some folks are more tied down to campus because of other responsibilities. I'm a cotton guy. It's all I do. So I don't really have an excuse. So it's good for me. But this provides that, you know, sort of opportunity or maybe requirement for them to get out and get in the cotton acres and meet with the producers. And, you know, there's these formal projects that we're getting funded for, but, you know, when you talk with folks, you're going to get additional feedback that could give you other ideas. And to me, the big benefit too is the on-farm trials where you actually are working with producers. And so myself, John Long, Jason Warren, and Solly as well, the four of us all have elements of our trials or elements of other trials where we're working on producer farms with producers. And to me, that's brings so much more value in, because you just learn so much more about what producers are doing, and maybe they have some more input about, you know, or ideas about what we can do in the future. So here's some other projects that just been spurred. These are kind of just offshoots of projects. We're looking at evaluating the onboard module weighing systems of these new CS and CP 690 machines. I mentioned earlier the analysis of that harvest application timing on actual leaf removal, not just bowl opening. Jason Warren does a lot of work in Southwest Oklahoma of looking at on-farm irrigation strategies. I think Mark and Reed Nichols are on the call, and I know he's worked with them on some things. And then we started some things this year. We're looking at bowl counts as yield predictors. That's what we always get asked to do. Come out there and do bowl count. And, you know, if I've got this many bowls, it should equal this kind of yield. So we started using our own farm variety trials as a location of bowl count evaluations. Some quick hurdles, you know, especially when you're starting out new, there's going to be a significant number of faculty that are not familiar with cotton. There is a learning curve there. All of us know that. And so if they've been familiar with other crops, I think it's important to know what can and cannot be applied. And, you know, sometimes it's tough to train folks that are, have numbers or letters after their names or titles and stuff. And so, you know, sometimes they got to learn by doing, but there's gonna be some unfamiliarity there with cotton for sure. So they're gonna need some guidance in shaping their projects. I think that's where producers can come in. You know, they don't listen to me sometimes, but, you know, if a producer tells them that's silly, then they're gonna be like, oh, well, maybe that is silly then. And so, you know, the State Support Committee can be a good source of guidance and help direct those areas. And I think Dr. Morgan said, you know, additional funding. You know, I'm very pleased with the funding. Producer money to me is more valuable than any other funding I get. But at the same time, it doesn't mean it's going to pay for everything I want to do on a project. And so sometimes you got to hustle and go track down additional funding to complete, you know, what you want to do. And there's different ways to do that, but I think, you know, that should be a goal too of folks is this is like, I think Gaylon used the term seed money, and I think that's totally what it is. I mean, this tells me what I need to be doing and gives me some money to get there. And if I need more, then I know I need to go hustle and find more. Meanwhile, I think that's all I've got. Gaylon, I don't know if there's any questions now or if I need to turn it back over to Shelley, but I can stop sharing my screen.
Thank you, Seth. That's a great overview. And I think Stu made comments, but